Hey expats and travelers alike, I'm Kalie with Expats Everywhere, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to get your pet from the US to the EU. Specifically, Portugal is where we moved to, and we did it with a dog, but cats are pretty similar. This is obviously for non-commercial, but I'm going to lay out the steps that we took to get him here and so that it's easier for you to do it. Now, I am a list maker, so I do have a checklist of the step-by-step process. If you would like that checklist, then send us an email at expatseverywhere@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to share that with you. Also, we put out a lot of different content, not just about pets, but how we got our D7 to get to Portugal. We talk about moving and all those steps, and then now that we're here, we're talking about setting things up and living. So be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can get all of that content. Let's go ahead and go through the steps of how to get your pet from the US to the EU. Now, again, like I said, this is for non-commercial reasons. This is just personal. So if you are going to be selling or doing something commercially, then this video is not for you. But if you are just moving there, then I'm going to give you the steps of how to do things. Most things are done towards the end, like those last 10 days before you leave. But there are things that you have to do and some things that you should do well in advance. So let's get started. The very first thing that you should do is you have to have your pet microchipped. Now, I'm going to be saying pet, but mainly I'm talking about dogs because we did it with a dog. Again, cats should be exactly the same. You'll want to check the USDA website for that, but the tab that they give says dogs, cats, and ferrets. So if you're moving with one of those, then the process should be the same. But as I speak, I'm talking about personal experience, which is with a dog. The microchip has to be the very first thing, and it has to be ISO compliant. It should be a 15-digit microchip. Now, this is the most common one to use, so it would be odd to not have that, but you want to check with your vet that that's what it is. If for some reason you already have a different microchip, that's okay, but you have to travel with a microchip reader yourself. So it's a bit of a hassle, but they have to be able to read that. So the best thing to do is just get the compliant one. But if you already have one in your pet, maybe it's a little older or something, then you just have to make sure that you have the reader and you can prove that there's a microchip in there. This has to be done first, and then you have to prove your rabies vaccination. So first thing is the microchip. Second thing is the rabies vaccination. The rabies vaccination has to be done at least 21 days before you get the endorsements from the USDA. This is something that you can do well in advance, and in my opinion, I would just go ahead and get this over with because nowadays there are rabies vaccinations that are 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year, and any of those work. So we did the 3 year for Pincho when we lived in Singapore, so his is good for several years. I would recommend doing that because then you just don't have to deal with it. Another thing that needs to be done in advance is the airline part of it. Now, airlines differ, so you want to, before you book your actual tickets to go there, you want to check what their pet policy is. Pincho is small, so he travels in the cabin with us. Not all airlines allow travel for pets in the cabin, so check that first if you are wanting your pet to be with you. Obviously, the pet has to be small. You can also go in the hold or the cargo. Now, because of COVID, there are different rules going on right now. So again, check with your airline. We flew Air France, so I'll go ahead and tell you our personal experience with Air France, and it was a good experience. Before we booked our tickets, I went ahead and I checked their pet policy, and I was able to see that he could be in the cabin with us because he's small enough. So what we did is we booked our tickets, and then you have to call and you have to add the pet to the ticket. You don't pay for anything when you do that, but you're kind of like reserving the seat because they're only allowed to have so many pets in the cabin at a time. So check the pet policy, book your ticket, and then call in and reserve the spot. Then when you check in on the day that you leave, you'll pay for it. We paid $125 for Pincho. A few things that they will ask you when you reserve the spot is what kind of dog it is, the size, so how much the dog weighs, and then the main thing is going to be the case. This is the case that we use. They're going to ask the dimensions. I don't know the specific dimensions, but I pretty much just looked up what dimensions you could use, and I told them that, and that was good enough. It needs to be a soft case, and it needs to have ventilation. So here you can see the door has the ventilation. It's just on the one side. Some cases have them on the top. Some cases have them in the back as well, but ours is just like this, and it's always been fine flying with him for this. He likes his case, so obviously he wants to get in and see what's going on. See here, you want to go in there, bud? Another thing that has to happen is it has to be big enough for them to move around in it. So as you can see, he was able to go in, and then if he wanted to turn around, he could turn around quite easily. So he likes his case, which is good for traveling for us. but they will ask you about case requirements. So you can go online and you can find plenty of airline approved cases, but make sure it's soft covered, it's got ventilation, and the dog's not jammed in there. Right, bud? That pretty much sums up what needs to be done in advance. So the microchip, the rabies vaccination, and reserving the spot on the airline. You need to then find a USDA accredited veterinarian. The good thing is once they're accredited, they know the process, so they can help you out, which is great. So there's a lot of paperwork that has to be done, and there's specific paperwork for the EU. You'll work with the office, and they'll ask you lots of different questions. The age, the microchip number, if they're already microchipped, the breed, the birthday, all of these types of things. So you can do this in advance as well, which I would recommend because it's a lot of paperwork. So you want to go back and forth with the vet and get all that paperwork kind of pre-filled out before you do the health check, which is what happens within 10 days. Get that stuff out of the way, and it'll just make it faster when you get closer to your departure, and then it's less stressful. With Portugal, the vet can submit the paperwork electronically. So there is a portal that they go through that they submit it. The vet will fill out all of the paperwork, you'll sign some stuff to make sure that it's all valid, and then they will submit it electronically. Then you have to have them mail it, actual mail, back to you. Now, it used to be that you could go and make yourself an appointment, because we did this before for Pincho for Singapore, and we were very close to a USDA office, and I was a little worried about the timetable because it is a small margin. So instead of doing the mail part, we just took the paperwork in, we set an appointment, took the paperwork in, and then they did all the stamps there, and we were good to go. But because of COVID, they're not taking appointments. Actually, it worked out better for us because we didn't have to drive and do it, and it was pretty quick with the electronic submission there and then the send back. Now, the tricky part is within 10 days of arrival is when you need to get the USDA to endorse the health certificate. It can be a little stressful because you've got a lot of other things going on, but it's not too bad if you just follow the steps. So what you'll do is you've already been working with your USDA accredited vet. The paperwork should pretty much be filled out. Set an appointment with them for them to do a health check. Remember, you already have your rabies vaccination, and you'll want a separate sheet with a health certificate showing that you have that rabies vaccination, whether it's from the same vet or a different vet. Then what you'll do is you'll go into the appointment, they'll do a health check. You'll check all the paperwork, you'll sign, and then they will submit it electronically. They should submit it that day. The USDA is actually really fast at getting it back to you, obviously because they know that it's a short timetable. So the vet will send it electronically, and you should have it back in hand a couple days later. Now, they have to mail it, so it's up to you how you want it mailed back. I would recommend UPS or FedEx. Don't do regular mail because it's hard to track it and it might take a little longer. What you need to do is you need to go online and you need to get a prepaid label. It's very easy. UPS I found was a little cheaper and a little easier to navigate their website. So I went on UPS, I just typed in the information. You don't even have to put the USDA's address. They don't want you to actually. They want you just to put your address. So on the actual return label and who the sender, just put your address and it will get back to you. So what you do is you go on and you can choose how fast you want it. You can do the next day, pay a little more. You can do 2 to 3 days, or you can do a little longer. I did 2 to 3 days because we did it with enough time. I wouldn't do any longer than that just in case there is a hiccup at the USDA office. But 2 to 3 days was fairly reasonable price, and we didn't really need it the next day. So it wasn't really necessary to get it expedited. That's a personal choice for you though, so do what's best for you, but I wouldn't recommend doing it past 3 days. So you get this label, you print it out, and they will send it, your vet will send it electronically in that portal. Once the USDA gets all the information, they print it and they emboss it. So pretty much you get this stamp on each page, and then they will mail that back to you. This is what you need to get into the EU. So it's very important that you don't forget that paperwork. The airline will also ask you for this information and the rabies vaccination information. So make sure you have all this paperwork readily available when you check in. All of this information is the same for going to the EU. Now, this last bit is probably different from country to country. For Portugal, we had to inform them that we were arriving. So we had to give them our airline information. And you're supposed to do this before 48 hours of arrival. I just did it a week in advance and it was fine. The lady at the office was very helpful. So what I did is, and I will put this in the description below, the website for those of you who are going to Portugal, and it gives you the list depending on where you enter. We entered in Porto, so there's an email there. I emailed and I explained we're coming, and there's an application that you fill out. It's just a little one-page application that you send them, and it gives all the information of your airline and what kind of pet you're bringing. It's very simple, and if there are any problems, they will email you back and ask questions. So that will be in the description below on how to do that part of it. Then you email them, and they will tell you that when you get there, you have to go through a vet check, and this is before you leave the airport. In Porto, it is at the baggage claim near Carousel 1. You'll see a little sign that says veterinarian office, and they're waiting for you. They know that you're arriving, so they're waiting for you. It's very simple. I was the only one in there. I just went in. I said, hi, I'm here, and this is Pincho, and gave the different paperwork, the same stuff we had to present to the airline, and we had to pay a 40 euro tax. The whole process there took maybe 10-15 minutes just because there's some paperwork that needs to be filled out. They give you the receipt, and then when you leave the airport, if they ask, you show them that you've paid the tax for the dog. They didn't actually ask us, but I had it in hand just in case. That's how to get from the US to the EU. Now, once you're here, there are a couple steps as well. With the USDA paperwork that you have, you can travel around the EU for up to 4 months. But they recommend going to a vet, and you have to register your pet. So as soon as you come in, a couple weeks in or so, they said that they'll email you with another receipt, even though you have the actual receipt in hand. And then you go to a vet and you get the dog registered. This is specific for Portugal. You'll want to check what country you're in to see what their process is. But I imagine that you need to register the pet in any EU country. So you go to the veterinarian, you explain your situation that you just moved here, you have all the same paperwork, they will register your pet, and then the recommendation is for you to get an EU passport. Now the reason for this is after 4 months, if you want to travel, even if you're driving, train, flying, you would have to get all of this paperwork again. It's only good for 4 months. But if you get an EU passport, then the dog can freely travel within the EU. All you have to show is that passport. These are the steps getting your pet from the US to the EU, and then once you're actually here, what you need to do. It's not too bad, it's not too stressful, but if you want that checklist, make sure you send us an email, and I'm happy to share that with you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and keep in touch with us. Bye!